Welcome on into another episode of Nate Hit the Foul Pole. I am Matthew Pine along with my co-host, Zach Goodman. How are you doing?
Doing good, Matt. And, the COVID test just came back for MLB. It only looks like 1.2% came back positive, so that's got me in a good mood.
Oh, yeah, I didn't even see that. That's good news. Obviously, about half the teams are back today doing what they call summer camp, spring training 2.0, and the Orioles are one of those teams. I was watching MLB Network earlier, and they were, showing the Cubs, showing the Yankees. I'm like, they're not going to give the Orioles any coverage here, and I was right. But hey.
Yeah, I don't think I ever see any kind of Oriole depiction on any of the MLB accounts. Like anytime they post a new video that has a hype video for the season, I never see the Orioles in it. But I guess we shouldn't expect to at this point.
Got a couple pictures here from Rock Kubako's Twitter account. They were, I think, Chris Davis struck out as per usual. I guess that was Tommy Malone who struck him out. But
and Matt, you posed this question to me earlier: is that meaning Tommy Malone is the best pitcher of all time, or Chris Davis is the worst hitter of all time?
The world may never know.
Can it be both?
It could be. I think that's a possibility. Tommy Malone, maybe he's facing his career resurgence. You never know. You got Tom Eshelman here.
Yeah, both guys are fighting for rotation spots. So I know Tom Eshelman got taken deep by Renato Nunez. Shouldn't feel too bad about that. He's going to hit a lot of dingers. But, Chris Davis hit a couple off the wall, I heard, and then he did hit a home run actually as well.
Nice.
There's progress, and continuing the amazing spring training Chris Davis had. He was probably the best player in spring training for us this year. So I think everyone's kind of looking forward to seeing Chris Davis on the field. Maybe some people aren't. We're going to talk about his contract a little later, but, maybe we see a little bit of a resurgence. We talked about it earlier.
So for today's show, we're going to focus mainly on contracts as it relates to the Orioles 2020 payroll. We were fortunate enough to have an interview with an agent, Trevor Kieboom.
Yeah, Trevor's great. He was awesome enough to come on, and he talked a lot about how, he works with agency, and the 60-game season is obviously different for everyone, and represents his two brothers, Carter and Spencer. FYI, in this interview, we did have some technical difficulties, so just bear with us, but it was really good and gave some, great information.
Absolutely, and I will cut to that interview now. Just bear with me one moment. And it was a good one, 12 minutes. We got some good content on him.
He was fantastic.
Okay, let's go full screen.
Now, welcome in Trevor Kieboom. He's an MLBPA certified agent and the brother of Carter Kieboom and Spencer Kieboom. Trevor, how you doing?
Good. Can't complain. Thanks for you guys for having me on.
Yeah, thanks for coming on. We're just going to talk to you a little bit about the 60-game season, how it affects agency. But first, why don't you give everyone a little bit of background about you, because you obviously have a really cool background.
Yeah, so I guess like most kids grew up wanting to play in the big leagues and grew up luckily here in East Cobb, Georgia, and played for the Astros, played for the Yankees, and all the kind of right teams to put you in the right position as you move on. And I was fortunate enough to be recruited by a handful of schools out of high school and ended up committing to Clemson out of high school, and spent 2 years there. Unfortunately, had a bunch of shoulder surgery, so it didn't really pan out. But I got a chance to play 1 year with my older brother, Spencer, while he was there. Wound up at Chattahoochee Valley Community College for a year and played there and enjoyed it. Got a chance to go out to the JUCO World Series and ended up coming to Georgia and finishing my career at Georgia. Because of all the shoulder surgeries, I knew that baseball really wasn't in my future on the field. Couldn't really throw the baseball much once I got to 22, 23. So tried to figure out, hey, how can I stay in the game and use my degree from Georgia and use the business school that I was at and use that to kind of parlay it into a career. And I'm not naive. I know I started my career in 2016, and Carter was the 28th pick in 2016. So I'm very lucky and blessed for that. But I've taken that and had a pretty good run at it and got some pretty good young guys, and was fortunate enough to get a chance to work with Emerson Hancock this year and this year's draft. So, the young guys, the up-and-coming guys have done pretty well with, and hopefully here in the next 4, 5, 6 years, they'll all have names for themselves.
Great. Yeah, and as a Orioles-related podcast, we did want to stick an Orioles-related question in here. And you did mention you played with your brother at Clemson. You also played with Stevie Wilkerson that year. What was that like?
So Stevie actually went to my rival high school. Stevie went to Pope High School. I went to Walton High School, and we're only a year in age difference. But the thing I'll tell you about Stevie's the most incredible athlete, one of the most incredible athletes I've ever played with. I've seen him in 4 feet of water jump out of it completely and land on the side of the pool.
Wow.
A fun guy, an energetic guy. Obviously, he can play all over the field, but just freakish as far as athletic ability.
Yeah, I don't know if you got a chance to see Wilkerson's save last year against the Angels, but just shows off that athleticism. He's pretty incredible, and definitely a fan favorite in Baltimore.
Yeah, I actually saw him. I was in Baltimore for a handful of games. I worked with Richard Lovelady with the Royals, and was there when those guys were there. And then I actually saw him, I think it was maybe the last game of the season, one of the last games of the season, where he had that incredible catch and toss.
Yeah, Fenway.
Yes.
And then that the fish shot kind of landed right in front of him. So,
yeah.
I remember that a little bit with Stevie.
Nice. So, as an agent, how do you approach contract negotiations? Do you look at precedent at all from previous contracts?
Yeah, absolutely. I think you have to have something to start out with, right? So, if I'm looking at a player, of course I like them, right? I work with them, and I think the world of them, both hopefully on the field and off the field. And but you got to start somewhere. So whether that be a contract 5, 6, 7 years ago or something more recent, I think us as an agency, we're able to kind of take the past and bring it into the present and hopefully create the future by molding all those together.
And what do you see as the hardest part of your job?
I think, predicting the future with players. If I go watch a 16, 17, 18-year-old kid, no different than a GM or a scouting director or cross-checker, whatever it may be, nobody knows what's inside the player's mind. And as much as we like the player, I think the mind is what ultimately controls a lot of it. So obviously I go to a game and I see a young man's talented. I talk to him and you talk to the parents and you kind of look at who he surrounds himself with. And you may like all the above, but he may get into A-ball or AA and, something happens with a girlfriend or something happens with a family member, and you just never know how these players are going to react. So the only thing we can really do is surround them with the best, so I can offer myself up to see them as much or as little as they would like. Each player's different. We have people on staff, whether it be, the legal side, the mental side, the health side, all to kind of surround these guys with. But like I said, at the end of the day, it's really difficult to get into a young man's mind and see exactly what's going to make them tick. You have an idea of what's going to make a lot of these guys tick, but you don't always know. You don't always know how they're going to react. So the best we can do is do our homework and make sure that we've surrounded those guys with the best people possible, and just let them know that, hey, we work for you and we're there for you. But that's the most we can do.
So, Trevor, just give us a overview of how the 2020 service time will work, how you think that affects your clients.
Yeah, so I think it calculates out to maybe 1 day every, counts of 3 or something like that. It's, the service time is going to be prorated as well. Obviously if there was no season, then the guys last year got the kind of the rollover service time of what they got before, which absolutely crushes, some of these young prospects in the game.
Yeah.
And benefits others, but no, I think service time is kind of the one thing that the players really want to hold on to, and they showed that, when they originally came to an agreement back in, I believe, March, was, hey, we'll give up the fully guaranteed money for service time. That's kind of what makes, this game tick on the business side, is teams own these players, 6, 7, 8 years. Some of these guys are in the system, and if they don't get Rule 5 and they make it to the big leagues, it'll be 10 years with a single organization. So I think, the one thing you have to hold on to as a player is your service time. And it's kind of allows your rights to tick. So hopefully this year can get it going, and some of these young guys can get up and accumulate a year of service time in the shortened period.
How do you see this 60-game season affecting agents, if at all?
Well, our revenue kind of comes off of the players. So I'm fortunate enough to be with the group that I don't think anyone plans for a pandemic, but they plan for their people and they plan for their employees in case something happens, whether it be a work shortage, whatever it may be. I'm fortunate enough to be with an agency that's done very well for itself over the last however many years, and our older guys are as good as our young guys. Our young guys are as good as our older guys. So I think. For us, because I can only speak on our behalf, is hey, let's get through this year, and let's keep our current guys that are in big leagues healthy. Let's get some of these young guys some service time, and kind of chalk 2020 up to one of those years, and move forward.
Yes, I was reading an article in the Washington Post that was profiling you and your two brothers, and it mentioned that Carter really looks up to you. And your brother Spencer. Is there any baseball knowledge you try to instill in Carter at a young age?
Yeah. So at a young age, probably not. Carter was, he was always following us around to the parks, and whether he was at my games or Spencer's games, or he himself would always just be up the batting cage. So we live a stone's throw from the high school right here, and every day Carter was up at the cages, and talent was never. Really a shortfall of Carter. He was always a little bit smaller until probably his junior year in high school. So always had an ability, always worked hard, but it was more of, hey, when is his strength going to come into play, and when is his size going to pick up? And now he stands in there at 6'2" and looks just fine. But I think us growing up, I looked up to Spencer. Carter looked up to me and Spencer. But I think at the end of the day, we both kind of, look up to Carter. And I think Carter's so gifted. And I know we talked a little bit about earlier what's going on in a player's head. And I think he's gifted in every aspect of the game. Obviously, he's talented on the field. But I think the way he prepares and the way he thinks about things and the way he talks and, just going to the cages with them and hitting for 30, 45 minutes, doesn't really want me talking. And I can give my input at the end of it, but he's very process-oriented. He has a plan in everything he does, whether it be a noon game, a 4:15 game, or a 7 o'clock game. He's very process-oriented, and I guess I just try not to mess it up. But there's obvious things, when I'm watching him play, and I had a chance to play third base in college, and I should say I attempted to play third base in college, but I think there's little things here and there at the plate or in the field that I can shoot him a text or give him a call, and usually I get the thanks, no thanks type of thing, but then I'll get a call a couple days later, and he say, hey, it worked, or that ended up triggering this thought, which worked. So he's professional in every single way, and when it comes time to deal with me as family or deal with me as business, there's really no issues.
And as a bit of a wrap-up question for you, still relating to your brother Carter, who's going into his full rookie year and replacing Anthony Rendon. How does 100 games, missing 100 games, how does that affect him?
The reps, obviously, and I think one thing people don't realize is getting reps on a big league field is astronomically different than getting reps in AA, AAA, or in spring training. And not talking about the fans or the atmosphere, but the speed of the game and the cut of the grass and the speed of the dirt in different stadiums, the way the grass, shifts one way or the other, the way the ball comes off the bat with people right behind you. And I think, taking the ball off the bat off of guys like, Stanton or Judge or Freddie, whoever it may be, is also a little bit different than taking it off of guys in AA or AAA. And, he's learning a new position. So ability is one thing, and putting it into action is another thing. But, the people that we talk to and all the guys that kind of talked about learning a new position, they always say, listen, about 100, 125, 150 innings in games until, you really get the hang of it. And fortunately and unfortunately, some guys got to learn in the spotlight and fail in the spotlight. But, I think if you look at kind of the steps he's taken, and obviously everyone can't see the stuff he does off the field, but the steps and strides he took just towards the end of spring training. If you take his last handful of games compared with the first handful, it's night and day. And I think what you can ask a young man is to get better, right? To add value to himself, add value to the ball club, and get better. And I think he'll add his value to the club just with his personality and his work ethic, and hopefully the numbers and all that come along with it. But you can only control what you can control, and he's controlled the input about as best as he could.
Definitely, yeah. Well, Trevor, we certainly appreciate you joining the show, and we are looking forward to the season.
Yeah, we are too, and as an agency, as a family, and as myself. So we're excited about it.
Appreciate it.
You got it.
That was a great interview from Trevor. I mean, he just provided a lot of agency info that I don't think many people, really know. We really wanted Agent on the show, and he's a fantastic guy. So glad to have him on.
Yeah, he was great. It's kind of cool to see these guys that have brothers in the league and they represent them, and just kind of interesting dynamic how that all works. And, he's got to start somewhere. He's already got a couple other clients, and we wish him nothing but the best. I mean, he's kind of one of these up-and-comer agents. So.
Yeah, for sure. And Carter Kieboom is going to be, a potential star here in a few years.
Mm-hmm.
So for him to be able to have that representation is awesome. He has Alex Space with the Texas Rangers, who is an up-and-coming star, but not, terribly Oriole related here. But we did want to give an agent's perspective on how this season is kind of playing out for them.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, he gave some great insight. So we did want to move on and keep with the same theme of contracts. So we're going to look at a couple different categories. We're going to start off with the Orioles' best contracts and their worst contracts. I think we all know their worst contract, but if you want to comment along who you think those people would be, Zach, I'll let you start.
Yeah, well, let's avoid Chris Davis for now, because I think we all know what we're going to say. But I want to start with Alex Cobb. He's on a 4-year, $57 million contract. Obviously, he was signed by Dan Duquette to be the ace of the staff a few years ago. How do you think that contract has worked out so far?
I mean, obviously, it's been pretty poor, and I think that's 100% due to injuries. I think when he's fully healthy, I think he's proven that, in the second half of the year that they signed him, he's proven to be very formidable, and it's not very easy to do in Camden Yards. But he signed in March, and he never really got a full spring training. He started out pretty god awful out of the gates. So I don't think it's worked out so far. This year they're going to be paying him. And the way I did this, in my preparation, I didn't do it for the prorated amounts. I did it if they would have played a full 162. So if they would have played a full 62, they would have had to pay him $9.5 million, which is 16% of the entire payroll. And I don't think he's quite worth that.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Hopefully this is a rebound year for him. I'm excited to see him on the mound. His third year of his contract. He's been hurt every other year. He's like you said, he's pitched well enough to be maybe a 3 or a 4 in most rotations. When in those second halves when he wasn't hurt, I'm excited to see him. I think he can pitch to a 4 or 5 ERA this year, which is fine for a rebuilding club. I don't really think he's ever worth $57 million. He was never really worth $57 million in the first place. And I really don't think he typically profiles that well in Camden Yards. He's not a super ground ball oriented pitcher, but maybe they could restructure the contract or something like that would make more sense for both sides. Cobb, once he leaves here after next year, or if the Orioles decide not to bring him back after this season, I'm not sure how much money he'll get, because he just hasn't really been healthy, and he hasn't really been that great when he is healthy. He's been, average, formidable, like you said. So that contract, not too big of a fan of right now, but it's definitely a veteran presence in a pitching rotation that doesn't have much other good pitching.
Yeah, and I think he'll slide right in to fill Dylan Bundy's shoes. They desperately need, reliable starting pitching. I mean, you have Asher Wojciechowski, you have John Means, and then, a couple other guys who might fill in here and there. Cobb, hopefully he shows up well. I don't think he's, after his contract is up, like you said, he's going to have to sign one of those show me deals. He's going to have to sign a 1-year, $5 million deal just to prove his worth, but he is getting up there in years. So we'll see.
Yeah. What kind of trade value do you think is possible for Cobb at this point? Do you think it's all gone, or do you think with a nice, season here, we could trade him in the off season?
Well, yeah, I think the offseason is more of a realistic possibility. I kind of think with this year, I don't know what the trade value for anyone would look like in a 60-game season. It's if you're, especially if, say, a guy, not in Cobb's case, but say a guy's a free agent after this year, they're probably going to have no value if you're just playing 60 games. So, but I mean, in the winter, I could see him maybe fetching a deal similar to Dylan Bundy, but maybe even less at that point.
Yeah, the general issue with these big contracts, with $57 million on it, and Bundy didn't have that sort of money tied up in his deal at all.
Mm-hmm.
The Orioles are still going to owe him a ton of money next year. They still owe him a ton of money this year. I think you would have to probably package a mid-level prospect to get anything back for Cobb, because teams don't want overpaid veterans.
Yeah, or pay some of his deal.
Yeah, I just don't think there's much value trade-wise, but maybe you can get a mid-level prospect, a low-level prospect, sort of like the Orioles did with Elio Prado and Nomar Romero when they got them from the Red Sox for Cashner. Obviously, Cashner wasn't making the sort of money Cobb was either, but I maybe if you throw in a prospect, you might be able to get something decent.
Yeah, and since we're disregarding Chris Davis, who was the next guy you wanted to mention?
I want to talk about Jose Iglesias for a little bit, because I think this is definitely one of the most interesting contract situations. He's only here on a 1-year, $3 million deal, but he does have a 2021 team option in which they would pay him $3 million more. So what do you think? Would you bring back Jose Iglesias, possibly extend him? What's your plan for him?
Yeah, I don't really see somebody knocking on the door per se at shortstop in the minor leagues. So I think I would. I think he provides a lot of assistance to the pitchers. So if you have a reliable shortstop, you have faith to put more balls in play. So I think I would. I think he's one of those guys I would take a look at, and especially if he likes it here, because he's been bouncing around the last couple of years. So I think he might want some stability.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, he's a glove first shortstop that can hit too. And I think that's pretty valuable to have. I think a lot of people really underrate Iglesias and his value, because he does play the shortstop position so well. He locks it down. He's always a positive DRS, and he's just a solid player overall. I think he's probably overall the best player in this team right now, aside from maybe Austin Hayes or John Means. But I think we will exercise that 2021 team option. I don't really think there will be too much of a trade market for him, just based on his age and the bat just not being amazing. Yeah. But I think he's a solid player, and probably replaceable down the road at some point when we find that shortstop prospect that's going to turn into a star, if we ever do find that guy. But right now, I think this is one of my favorite contracts on the team. I think he's going to play very well this year.
I did have one more semi-bad contract. It's really not that bad, just because the Orioles don't pay a whole lot of money. Their payroll is pretty low. But I did want to bring up Michael Givens, just because he is making $3.2 million, and his contract expires after next year, so he has another year of arbitration to go through. And if he's going to be an ineffective closer, and say Hunter Harvey takes over that role, you probably don't want an ineffective reliever making that much money. So I think he's a big-time trade candidate, and I hope he does well on a 60-game spurt. Maybe they can trade him come the end of August.
Yeah, that's probably what's going to happen. They didn't find a deal last year at the trade deadline. They couldn't find a deal this offseason. He's just kind of there. I don't know really how much value he brings. I'm not a big fan of Michael Givens. I think they misused him. I've said that before. But I maybe you, again, grab a mid-level prospect. He's making a lot of money and not doing all that much. Right. So maybe a mid-level guy for him. You could even see, if the Orioles don't find a deal for him, I could even see them declining to even make an offer in arbitration. It's definitely possible.
Yep.
I'm not really sure if this is a good contract at all. I just don't really like the deal, and I really don't want to bring him back after this, because he's a pretty okay pitcher on a not very good team, and I just don't think there's a lot of value he brings.
Yeah. There is no value of a good closer on a bad team.
Yeah, that's exactly it.
Yeah,
that's exactly it.
And he's not a good closer, so.
Yeah, so while we're going over the roster here, I wanted to talk a little bit about some possible guys you think can be extended. Is there any guy you're looking at right now who you say, man, we need to give him a contract?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I look at two guys who were injured in Austin Hayes and Hunter Harvey. These are guys that are, not young bucks per se. Austin Hayes is 24. He won't be a free agent until he's 30. Hunter Harvey won't be a free agent until he's 31. So I think these are guys that would be open to extensions, especially to, quote unquote, secure the bag, with their injury history. And, it would be good to have a couple of building blocks for the future.
Yeah, and I think I agree with both of those 100%. Those are two guys I had marked down too. I think they're both fan favorites, and they will become more fan favorites as we start to go here. I think Austin Hayes, especially, is already with Trey Mancini being out, is the fan favorite right now. Everyone loves Austin Hayes. It makes Mike Elias and Peter Angelos look a lot better if they give him a big deal right now. We saw some other teams do this with their young guys. Eloy Jimenez and Luis Robert, those kind of guys from the White Sox all got big deals before they ever reached the majors. That's what I'd like to see for Austin Hayes as well, even though he's already in the majors. I'd like to see a 6 or 7 year extension that just kind of locks him down. We don't have to go through arbitration with him, and it's a really nice deal for both sides, and he's going to continue to be, the center field presence. And then, Hunter Harvey's not one of my favorite extension candidates, but he is a guy that I think we could extend for pretty cheap. Like you said, maybe give him a 6 year or 5 year or whatever you want. And he's a guy who profiles as a bullpen piece 100%, make a few spot starts here and there. Maybe he's even your closer. So I think both could be definitely worth it.
I don't want to backstep here or anything, but I think I might actually take back the Hunter Harvey thing just because of his dad is Brian Harvey. So he has the major league experience to say, no, you should probably test the market, if you want to. So I don't know if that would be the best candidate. I might replace him with John Means or somebody like that. But
yeah, John Means is an interesting guy too. I mean, let's see how he pitches this year. I'm pretty confident that he's going to be, the ace of the staff, I guess, and probably pretty decent. I don't know if he'll replicate his 2019 numbers, but I'm excited to see how he does. And I think after this year, we'll have a better kind of gauge on whether his success is for real, maybe to give him that big deal, 6 or 7 year deal for him. But I think the Orioles should definitely learn at this point to lock up your guys early. Once Adley Rutschman's here, once Heston Kjerstad's here, lock them up early because you don't want to let them walk like Manny. That we lost so many fans and so much interest because we let Manny walk.
What's interesting is, Mike Elias and Sig Mejdal, while they were with the Astros, they kind of started the trend. John Singleton. Yeah. John Singleton was the first guy to really sign that big extension without having much MLB service. So I don't think they're shy in any way, shape, or form of doing that.
Yeah, I mean, just that's a great point, and just lock up your young guys. I mean, we're trying to build this homegrown talent pipeline that's gonna, supply the majors for years to come. You've got to lock these guys up. I mean, as soon as you see 1 or 2 years of great success, you say, okay, let's give them the deal now. The Orioles didn't do that with Machado. We didn't do it with Scope. We unfortunately did it with Davis, and let's see how we saw how that worked out. But.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think the difference is between Davis isn't, he's getting 137 million, and you hope with these injury guys, they're not going to take, more than 50, 60 million. I don't know what the figure would be, maybe 80 million, but yeah, I think within reason, I think they're always a good idea for the club. I don't think it's necessarily the best idea for the player because the player can always bet on himself. So
yeah, I do want to touch on Chris Davis though, because we did ignore him before. And not on how bad his contract is because we know it's horrible, but how much longer do you see Chris Davis sticking around on the team?
I don't know. I think they could justify it. I don't really know what the specifics would be because if you cut him and you still have to pay him, then why are you cutting him? It's not like who's the first baseman that would take over from Ryan Mountcastle, who's also played left field, who could be the DH. So I don't really know if it's going to be anytime soon. Maybe 2021, maybe 2022. I have no idea.
Yeah, I mean, it's a comforting feeling knowing that he's not going to be on our next competitive team. That's the good news. I think you look at it as, but I would not like to see him around until 2022. That would be extremely. I mean, that just means our rebuild is way behind. So I hope that doesn't happen. But right now, he's not necessarily blocking anyone, like you said. It's no really better to pay him when you cut him as it is just to have him on the roster. So I pretty much agree with you there.
Even though he does have a negative WAR, so
yeah, I mean, it's pretty.
So
it's
if you are tanking, you want him on your team.
No, but I was just mentioning the comeback trail. It's on. It's on. It's coming back.
Okay.
Yeah, so I also wanted to touch on, as this rebuild goes on, a few free agents that you would want to pick up that are possible stars or, just above replacement level. Were there any guys you had in mind for the next few years to kind of put in the lineup in the rotation as a really highly rated guy?
I try to kind of temper my expectations with this list. I did a list of 3 guys, and I think the most obvious one, and you might actually share him on your list, is Carlos Correa, just because he has the whole Astros connection with
Yep.
Mike Elias, and we don't really have anybody in our system who can play up the middle immediately. He's a free agent in 2022, so that would pretty much perfectly line up with our rebuild.
Yeah, I had him there too. He's definitely, I think, a great fit. And like you said, he's Mike Elias' guy from day one. Mike Elias found him. Mike Elias rooted for him. Mike Elias drafted him. He's Mike and Sig's guy all the way.
Mm-hmm.
So I definitely think they're going to be interested in bringing him back. It's going to come at a cost, probably 75, 100 million, 150 million, somewhere in that range.
Hope not.
Well, it could get pretty high. But I think this is a guy they'll be willing to pay for.
Mm-hmm.
Another Astro that I wanted to mention was George Springer, who will be a free agent after next season, and after this season. I'm sorry,
mm-hmm.
and he's going to be probably a guy the Astros won't look to extend, but we can't say that with certainty right now.
Yep.
But he's another Astros connection. I think could provide a ton of leadership, and he could be that veteran presence in the clubhouse. And I want to mention another Astro while we're at it. And not for potentially next year, but a few years down the road, and kind of the Orioles' Carlos Beltran. How the Astros use Carlos Beltran as their experienced guy, the really old piece that kind of brought the clubhouse together, and that will be Michael Brantley. I think would be a nice thing to add at some point.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I could see that. I think the Astros especially are going to have to make some really tough decisions because Verlander, they got all these guys they have to pay eventually, so they're going to have to pick and choose who they don't pay. So regardless if the Orioles sign them, or if another team signs them, these guys are going to be on other teams pretty quickly. And I think if the Orioles can make it work, if it's feasible, I would definitely go for these guys. It's just how much are they going to command is the real question.
For sure. But if we look at this 2022 class of shortstops, it's incredible. And that's where the Orioles really lack right now in organizational depth. We don't really have our long-term shortstop. Maybe it's Iglesias. I don't know. But the Orioles don't have a second baseman either long-term. I mean, you look at Francisco Lindor, Javi Baez, Correa, Seager, and Trevor Story, which is just incredible stars to the class. These are all young talents. These are all young stars that will be available. So maybe the Orioles nab one of the 5. I mean, they are certainly a team that will be in need of a shortstop at the time. Chris Bryant's in this class. We'll just have to see how it goes. Yeah, it's gonna be expensive. Noah Syndergaard's in this class, who I talked to you about earlier, who's gonna be another super expensive piece that I think the Orioles could make a run at eventually, because I think they know, even with this homegrown talent pipeline they want to bring through, it's still incredibly hard to not sign premium free agents. It's really difficult to win like that.
Yeah, I agree. I think COVID's going to have a huge impact across the league in terms of how much money goes around. But I did want to talk. I have 2 more guys. I did want to talk about a pitcher. Talk about a pitcher in Kyle Freeland, who was in the conversation for Cy Young a couple years back with the Colorado Rockies. And if he can pitch in Coors, he can pitch in any ballpark. And I think he would kind of come on the cheap because he's coming off a bad year. And I think he would be very much attainable for the Orioles in the next 2 years.
Yeah, I like that a lot. I think it's a solid maybe 3 or 2 in your rotation, depending on how Grayson and DL Hall work out.
Yeah.
But that's a solid piece. It's going to be hard to get pitchers to sign in Camden Yards. It's just really, that's always the struggle the Orioles have. I've said over the past few years, I think we should extend the fences by 5 or 6 feet just to make pitchers want to sign here, because they really never want to play here. But that's a solid piece. I think there's a lot of those middle of the road starting pitchers that have that potential that you could possibly sign up and have them for 3 or 4 years. I like that a lot.
Did you have any other guys before I get to my last guy?
No, I kind of mentioned everyone, but Michael Brantley is my golden ticket guy. I think we really need to, when we take that next step into maybe being that playoff caliber team, I think he's a perfect guy to mentor everyone and bring the clubhouse together.
Yeah, I think you see that with all these rebuilding teams when they're ready to win. The Cubs certainly did that in 2016. Astros certainly did that. You always got to bring in if not 2 high-profile guys to really push it forward.
David Ross was that guy for the Cubs.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
So they.
Besides the trade acquisitions.
Yep.
My last guy I want to talk about, also on the Cubs, is Kyle Schwarber. This is my golden ticket guy. This would be like the absolute dream scenario. He's got to get the heck out of the National League, but even if they're instituting a DH, it doesn't really matter. But I pair him with Heston Kjerstad in that lineup. Those two power lefty bats, I think he would absolutely mash at Camden Yards.
Yeah, I love that. That was one of the reasons I really started liking the Heston Kjerstad pick a lot more, is when I realized, man, you've got that short porch in right field, then in Yankee Stadium, and in a bunch of
Fenway
ballparks around the AL East. It's great. So yeah, Fenway, like you say, that's left-handed power is definitely coveted with the Orioles. I think we're going to make a lot of those moves down the road. I think we're going to build a team that is sort of built towards left-handed power. So Kyle Schwarber may cost us $80 million or so, like you say.
Probably.
Somewhere in that ballpark, but that would be a definite piece to slot into the middle of the lineup.
For sure. Yeah. Anything else before we get out of here? I know we got a big show planned next week.
Yeah, we do. We're going to have Paul Mancano, the Masson All Access podcast host. He's going to be great. He's going to guest host with us, not just an interview. So we're going to talk about the Orioles schedule and the 60-man roster right now, and then obviously we're making predictions for the 30-man, so it's going to be a great show. Yeah,
jam-packed. Should be fun. We're looking forward to it. If you are tuning in on YouTube, you can hit us up on our audio platforms on Spotify, Google Podcasts, SoundCloud, and iTunes. If you're listening to the audio version, go to our YouTube page and subscribe. We appreciate you listening, and we will speak to you next week.